Good evening, all of you. Today we are going to discuss about the memory. After going through this unit, you will be able to gain an insight into the mental processes involving memory, forgetting, imagination, and reasoning. First of all, we are going to discuss about the memory. It is said education is a lifelong process and we are learning all the time, but simply learning without being able to repeat that in another situation or occasion is of no use. Thus, we must be able to make use of past experiences. We must be able to produce it. This power of reproduction is known as memory, or the ability to retain and recall the past events to present consciousness. This implies that memory is the production of past experience even without the presence of the stimulus. Then Guilford defined memory is the retention or storage of information in any form. Woodworth and Marquez defined memory consists in learning what was previously learned. Rayburn defined the power that we have to store our experience and to bring them back into the field of consciousness sometime after the experience have occurred in term as memory. Phil Edistel defined memory is the ability to retain and produce impressions once perceived. Memory is the spatial ability of our mind to store when we learn something to recollect and reproduce it after some time. Memory is the complex process involving learning, retention, recall, and recognition. The experiences which we undergo leaves traces in our minds in the form of schemas. The length of our retention depends on the strength and quality of the traces. So there are types of memory. First one is immediate memory. This is also known as short term memory. This memory is when the individual has to reproduce immediately after he has learned something. Thus the time span is very less for the matter to be registered in the consciousness. Hence the learned matter is forgotten rapidly. That is, we may first look at the seat number of our ticket, and once we sit down we forget about it. In this type of memory, the retention time is very brief. Immediate memory is needed when helps us to learn a thing immediately when with a speed and accuracy, remember it for a short duration and forget it rapidly after use. Then second is short term memory. This type of memory is also called as temporary memory. It is not short lived as immediate memory. The information temporarily stored in short term memory may last as long as 30 seconds even if the material is not being reassembled. However, some people are able to retain much more information in short term memories by a process called chunking, chunking, and which groups information by coding it. That is, the number 143254376 can be remembered by listening under three heads: 143254376 for better memory. Then third one is long term memory. This is also known as permanent memory. Here the individual learns and retains the information for a very long period of time. There is an interval of time being learning and recall or reproduction. Thus the permanent memory is involved, that is knowing our account number of the bank or the phone number. So we see that memory is a process involving learning and reproduction. The amount of material that can be immediately reproduced after one repetition is called span of memory. The phenomenon of memory may be studied under four different aspects, with that the four R's, that is registration or learning, retention, recall, and recognition. First of all, we are going to discuss about registration or learning. Before remembering it must be registered or learned. Learning requires time. It has economical use of time in learning. The most efficient methods of learning or memorizing that would yield the best result from the point of view of remembering effectively for a long time are as follows. Second, first one in registration memories, rote memorization. This is learning without understanding, yet meaningful material is easily learned. Then nonsense materials. It's easy to learn poetry than prose. Prose is easy to learn than learn, and then disconnected words. Disconnected words are easy to learn than nonsense words. This logical sequence is important along with the systematic arrangement of ideas. However, mechanical learning must be avoided as it is less effective. Second is spaced versus mass learning. In a spaced learning, the learner has been allowed some rest in memorization. The subject is not required to memorize the assignment in one continuous time period. Intervals are provided. The principle of work and rest is followed. In mass learning, the subject has to memorize the assigned material at one sitting without any interval or rest until it is mastered. Shorter study periods are better for young pupils and slow learners. Spaced learning benefit pupils of lower classes when motivation level is low or material is complex and difficult to understand. It is better to introduce periods of rest while studying. This helps in removing the monotony of long periods of study. Retention, attention also does not flag, and fatigue is avoided. Mass learning is effectively when the pupils are very intelligent or are highly motivated. Although both the methods of learning are found to be useful and effective in one situation or the other, the fact success in the use of a particular method depends more on abilities of the individual and the nature and range of the material to be memorized than on the method itself. Then third one is whole versus part method of learning. Let's take the example of a poem. When the poem is read again and again from start to finish, this is whole method of learning. This method can be adopted when the material is not very lengthy and when the material is logically arranged. Less time is used compared to part method. Here again, the poem, for example, is broken down to parts or stanzas, then learned. Thus, slow learners and average students are benefited. The learner is motivated each time he masters the parts. Thus, the whole content is slowly mastered. Then, even when the material is large and is not well organized, this method can be used. Then, recitation, the best method of learning, whereby the students read the lesson few times and then reviews the lesson without the book. That is, he recites the material learned to him. Studies have shown that self recitation is better and time saving than just reading and rereading, because permanent retention is achieved. Learner is able to detect his weakness and rectify them, thus, he knows his progress as well. Then, mnemonic devices grouping always helps to memorize easily, thus, we learn poetry easily compared to prose, but many materials come without such natural grouping. Thus, the artificial associations are made to associate the ideas or the material. Thus, memory, which is improved by use of artificial associates, is called mnemonics. Thus, things are learned verbatim without understanding it. That is, Vibegyor, whose letters represent the color of rainbow. That is Vibgyor. Then retention. The process of learning involves the stages of retention. Thus, learning becomes permanent. Retention is the inactive state of learned activity. The learning activity leaves a mark on the brain structure. This mark is called a memory trace, which is imprinted on the cerebral cortex. This preservation of the memory trace in the brain is retaining of the learning activity. This can be compared to the traces or marks in the sand, that is our footprints made on the sand. The deeper the trace, the longer the retention. The weak traces slowly fades away. Memory can be improved, but the depth of the trace or retention is difficult to improve by practice. The reason being the traces are that are made depend on the genetic inheritance. The retention, however, can be measured in three ways: recall, recognition, relearning. Recall method, a direct method of testing retention, where the capacity to recall and reproduce is tested. We can recall matter only if we have retained it. That is, in a writing a test, the pupil's retention and recall is tested. But sometimes we are not able to recall even when we know the matter. So we cannot measure the retention. Therefore, this is the poorest retention score of all that is learned. Recognition method. This method is widely used now. A response given from which the pupil has to pick out the correct answer or recognize the correct answer. This ability of recognizing the correct answer helps and measures the power of retention. This has a higher score of testing retention than recall method, and also puts less strain on the child. That is, multiple choice question or questions based on a picture or map. Then relearning method. Let's give an example. ABC is learning a long poem and it takes him 20 minutes and 4 trials to memorize it. After a few days, ABC Kane learns the poem, and now in 10 minutes and 2 trials, he learns it fully. Thus, we can assume that retention has taken place because the time and the number of trials have reduced. Thus, this method is the best compared to the recognition and recall method. Then recall. The third aspect of memory is called we learn because we need to recall them at some point of time or other. So we can say that recall is the mental revival of past experience, the list index of retention, because we are unable to remember even though we know it. Recall depends on the mental condition and the memory trace formed. Then recognition and recall are closely related. Recall provides the material in memory, while recognition is the process of accepting or rejecting. Recognition is better than recall as an index of retention. Recognition starts with the object given, whereas recalls find the object from the mind. Thus, when we meet a person, recognize that person's face but may not be able to recall his name. Recognition is more a passive behavior than an active process like recall. Here, recall is a revival of the past experience experiences. The process being in the mind, it involves active mental process. List index of measuring retention. That is short answer type question involves recall. In recognition, recognition is the perception and identification of an object. The process begins from the object. It involves passive mental process. High index of measuring retention. That is multiple choice question. Sees the picture and recognize the answer. um, Now we are going to discuss about the forgetting. In our daily life, we have experienced the time we learn to recall the names of friends, and we realize that we have forgotten it. Forgetting occurs only when some learning has taken place. If there is no learning, then there is no forgetting. This forgetting and remembering are two sides of the same coin. So when we are unable to remember, it's called forgetting. Moon defines forgetting is the loss, permanent or temporary, of the ability to recall or recognize something learned earlier. Drever defines forgetting means failure at any time to recall an experience when attempting to do so or perform an action previously done. And Bhatia defines forgetting is the failure of an individual to review in consciousness an idea or a group of ideas without the help of original stimulus. Thus, forgetting is being unable to find the correct information from the mind at the given situation. Forgetting is temporary at times when later we can remember the names and actions, whereas forgetting is said to be permanent when in no situation we are able to recall the information. So let's see why we are unable to recall information and why do we forget. Factor influencing forgetting. Decay through disuse or theory of decay. Forgetting is a process of fading of the learned matter with passage of time. According to this view, the vivid impressions created in the cerebral cortex fade away as time passes. Such finding or decay could be the result of normal metabolic processes of the brain. As time passes, these processes might cause the traces of material once learned to disintegrate gradually and eventually to disappear altogether. Interference of association or theory of interference. Here we see that forgetting is not caused just by fading away of traces, but by influence of the intervening activities. Here, retroactive interferences. Here, new learning works backward and interference with old learning. Then, proactive inhibition or interference. Here, what we have learned previously interferes with the new learning. Forgetting is our daily life is more due to proactive interference. Our ability to recall what we have learned is reduced by experiences previously learned. Then we are going to discuss about the theory of repression or motivated forgetting. The two earlier theories are psychological process of affecting mental stress or interference in learning, but here the person is not given importance. For some people, forgetting is a psychological process whereby will the unpleasant or conflicting experiences are represented and pushed uh, into the unconscious and forgotten. Thus, repression is done because it may cause anxiety to remember the experiences, that is, remembering loved ones whom we will never see again. We want to forget those people who hurts us. So, emotions, rise in emotions like fear or anger or love lead to forget the learned experiences. That is, a student afraid of a teacher may forget what has been learned. Then, change of stimulus condition. We may have learned in a specific environment, but we forget in change environment. That is, we can say the speech well at home, but in front of the audience, we are unable to speak. Then, poor health. This prevents us from remembering learned material. Defective mental state, fatigue, lack of interest or willingness lead to forgetting. Then factors which helps to minimize forgetting or factors which help to improve forgetting. Here one, rate of learning. It's a fallacy that rapid learning is associated with rapid forgetting. Easy come, easy do. But the reverse is actually true. In rapid learning, forgetting is slow when learning is slow, forgetting is rapid. Thus, a slow learner would eventually lose interest in the subject, thus forget the material rather quickly than a quick learner. Then, overlearning, forgetting is said to be taking place as soon as we stop learning. So we must recall immediately after we have learned, and it must continue after intervals. Learning must be carried beyond the point where recall is just barely possible. Overlearning beyond the point of complete mastery strengthens the impression in the brain. Periodic review. This is very similar to self recitation. Thus, as soon as we learn, we start the review of the data. Reviews at the frequent intervals prevent the decay of the learned data or information. Kind of material, easy Simple, meaningful, and logically related materials are easy to retain and forgotten less rapidly. Thus, general concepts, scientific interpretations are better retained, meaningless materials are forgotten quickly. Thus, associations make material meaningful and quick to remember. Then, intention to learn, firm determination or strong will to learn is required to achieve success. Some materials given to set of students, wherein one is willing and other is not willing. In such case, we see that retention was greater in those students who had a determination to learn. Then proper method of learning, economical method must be chosen depending on the material to be learned. So we choose a spaced versus mass or whole versus part learning. Then self recitation, after reading a lesson a few times, the student must try to review the whole thing without the help of a book. This method may also be termed as attempted recall, and it makes a more economical use of one's study time. It also helps towards permanent retention. How can we improve the way we learn? A will to learn. Learning is better achieved when there is a drive to learn. Thus, without intention, learning is not achieved much. Then, use multiple sensory learning. Things are better remembered when presented through more than one sense, that is, heard and written on the blackboard help better retention than only hearing something. Rehearse and recite. Rehearsal and recitation are useful in memorizing. The self evolution is possible, and learning can be modified accordingly. Then space your learning. Spacing what we learn or distributed learning helps better retention. Learning as things learned in a small part is retained longer. Follow the principle of association. Associating what we are learning with what we are already know helps in remembering. That is, A for apple, Z for zebra, etc. Use correlation. Topics must be taught or learned in a watertight compartments, thus correlated with experiences and related subjects to make learning interesting. Then grouping and rhythm, that is, multiple tables and poems are easy to learn because of grouping and rhythm. Use of mnemonics also aids learning. Whole to part to whole. Before intensive study, go through the whole matter, understand it, break it to parts, and then study it whole following the whole to part to whole method. Then take breaks. Periods of change, rest, and sleep helps remove fatigue and monotony. Thus, fresh mind stores meaningful experience for longer time. Overlearn. Uh, Overlearning helps retention, review, and revise very soon. Avoid interference of subject similarity. Interference causes forgetting. So similar situation subjects that must be spaced out. Complete the works. So do sufficient real work, and then being the next learning situation. Good environment. Better learning environment makes learning interesting and vivid by by using teaching aids, adopting new methods and techniques. Then imagination. Imagination is a spontaneous process which occurs when an individual is doing nothing in particular, is not responding to any clearly identifiable stimulus, and is relatively passive. It is actually the experience of earlier sensory experience in the absence of relevant stimulus. Therefore, imagination is based on one's past experiences. It is through sensation and perception that the knowledge of the world is acquired. Imagination can also be defined as mental manipulation. These mental manipulations involve recall of past experience in the form of mental images and in arranging them in a pattern to form a new combination. Here, the patterns can be made by adding or deleting the images. A series of images are called imaginary imagery. Imagery could be obtained from any of five senses. Imagery is the exact replica of the object. That is, when we ask to have an auditory image of the school bell, one will not imagine the structure of any apart from the school bell. So, McDowell defined imagination. Imagination is thinking of remote objects. Woodward defined imagination is mental manipulation when the individual recalls facts previously observed in reality and proceeds to arrange this fact into a new pattern. He is said to show imagination. Thus, imagination represents a very simple and passive type of thinking process. Normally, imagination occurs when one is relatively free and is not particularly directing their attention to any specific problem or issue. It is, in a way, a sort of idle activity. Types of imagination here, there are two types: reproductive and productive or constructive. Then productive is again divided into creative and imitative. Imitative is again divided as pragmatic, aesthetic, and fantastic. Imagination mainly occur in two ways: the imagination that may be the exact copy of the original, or may be the original rearranged to create something new altogether. Thus we get reproductive imagination. The reproductive imagination is a mere repetition of the past experiences. This kind of imagination is considered to be the lowest form. That is, when we memorize or rote memory, it is actual reproduction without any addition or cutout. Then, productive or constructive imagination, when the imagination is altered and reconstructed and new images are formed, is called reproductive imagination. That is, writing a poem, painting, anything which shows newness or novelty of ideas. This is a sub divided into creative imagination, imitative imagination. Creative imagination is when something new is created, there is originality in the creation. It is a very superior kind of imagination, that is scientists, artists, novelists, poets, playwrights. Then creative imagination is again subdivided to aesthetic imagination, when it is directed to the production and perception of beauty. No outside control is accepted. The artist has his own code of laws of working. That is, an artist or a dancer or a musician. Then pragmatic imagination, when the imagination fulfills a practical aspect. That is, architects imagine designing a building, external control is permanent. Then fantastic type of imagination, many people build castles in the air. In this case, the imagination has no control, there are no condition applying here. Then imitative imagination is when creative imagination is used or the original idea is adopted. That is, when a play is based on the novel or a script becomes film. Thus, even readers of the science, history, travel books, novel, and poetry all exercise imitative imagination. Then reasoning. Here, meaning of reasoning is that reasoning plays a significant role in one's adjustment to one's environment. It controls not only one's cognitive activities but may also influence the total behavior and personality by the proper or improper development of one's reasoning ability. It is essentially a cognitive ability and is like thinking in many aspects. Characteristic of reasoning: it has defined goal or purpose. It is implicit act and involves problem solving behavior. It involves the use of one's previous knowledge and experience. In reasoning, there is mental exploration rather than motor exploration, as it involves mental exploration of the reason or cause of an event or happening. It is highly symbolic function. The ability to interpret various symbols, development of concepts and language aids reasoning. Thus, it can be concluded that reasoning is productive and advanced stage in complex process of thinking. It is more serious and complex mental process than Garrett defines. Reasoning is stepwise thinking with a purpose or goal in mind. Gates define reasoning is the term applied to highly purposeful, controlled, and selective thinking. One define reasoning is combining past experiences in order to solve a problem which cannot be solved by mere reproduction of earlier solution. An analysis of above definition reveals that reasoning depicts a higher type of thinking, which is very careful, systematic, and organized function. It may follow some logical, systematic steps like identification of goal or purpose to which the reasoning is to be directed. Mental exploration or search for various possibilities, cause and effect relationships, or solutions for realizing the said goal or purposes based on the previously learning or experiences and present observations or attempts. The selection of the most appropriate possibility or solution by careful mental analysis of all the available alternatives, testing the validity of the selected possibility or solution purely through mental exercise, and thus finally accepting or rejecting it for the actual solution of the problem. Thus, reasoning may be termed as highly specialized thinking, which helps an individual to explore mentally the cause and effect relationships of an event or solution of a problem by adopting some well organized systematic steps based on previously experiences combined with present observation. So, in conclusion, thinking is a pattern of behavior in which we make use of internal representations, symbols, signs, etc. of the things and events for the solution of some specific purposeful problem. We think with the help of percepts, image, object, concept, symbol, signs, and language. Thinking can be convergent, one best answer from many sources, divergent, different ideas from a source, critical, assessing the worth and validity of something, reflective, insightful, cognitive thinking, or lateral thinking, cut out of the box. And memory is the ability to retain and reproduce impressions once perceived. Types of memory are immediate, few seconds, short term up to 30 seconds if not chunked or coded, and permanent for fairly long time. Retention can be measured through the recall method, the recognition method, and the relearning method. Then registration or learning is done through rote memorization spacing out the learning material, using whole or part learning, recitation, and using mnemonics. Forgetting is the inability to find the correct information from our memory at the given situation. It can be temporary or permanent. Imagination is passive, idle time activity based on past experiences. Imagination can be reproductive or productive. Productive imagination can be further be creative, pragmatic, aesthetic, fantastic, or imitative. Then reasoning is stepwise thinking with a purpose or goal in mind. Here, thinking the mental exploration for finding out the solution of a problem. Here, memory is the retention or storage of information in any form. Forgetting the inability to find the correct information from our memory at given situation. Then imagination and idle passive activity based on previous experience in which one thinks of remote objects. Then reasoning, a highly purposeful, controlled, selective, and step by step thinking. Uh, uh, in reference, here S.S. Chauhan's book Advanced Educational Psychology, in Vikas Publishing House Private Limited, New Delhi, and S.K. Mangal 2008 Advanced Educational Psychology, Prentice Hall of India Private Limited. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you.